This is the How'd You Do It podcast, and I'm your host, Lyle Wilkes. I believe that people have more to offer and knowledge to share than they ever give themselves credit for. So with that, my goal is to deep dive into the success stories of business owners, entrepreneurs, and community icons so they can share the road they traveled and what they learned along the way. Welcome to episode 11 of the How'd You Do It podcast. I'm Lyle Wilkes, your host, and this video is a little bit different today. It's just me, and I decided to do this because I think there's some important takeaways and lessons that I've learned from the first 10 episodes of the podcast so far. I started this because my short time on this earth, I have met some pretty amazing people. And through meeting those people and building those relationships, they've taught me a lot about life and just things that I think that other people could get some great value out of. And so what I want to do is take just a small break before I start bringing other fantastic people on and talk about some of the lessons that I did learn from each episode so far. So here it is. So the first episode we had was Jimmy Parsons with Guild Mortgage, and me and Jimmy go back. He was one of the first lenders that I met and did business with when I got into the world of real estate. One of the things that I admire a lot about Jimmy, and if I could sum it up in one word, and I guess that's probably a good thing to preface it on, is that I've got kind of a one-liner for each individual that I've interviewed so far on the podcast, and his one line is aim higher. That's one of the biggest lessons I learned from having that conversation with Jimmy. And what I mean by aim higher is ambition and drive. I think that is really what separates Jimmy, and that's one of the biggest things I learned from him, was to have that high energy, that high drive, and high ambition.
Adding a little juice on top of the fundamentals is the differentiating factor that makes people even greater than the normal average person. So, for instance, let's say you're mastering the fundamentals, non-negotiable in sales every day. You got to be prospecting at least an hour a day.
Yeah.
Every day.
Agreed.
And if you can't do that, then you probably don't get to play. You're going to have a mediocre career in sales.
Yeah.
At minimum, 1 hour a day, just phone call prospecting. Whether you're a realtor, mortgage loan officer, selling Cutco knives, I don't care.
Toilet paper doesn't
Right.
matter. Yeah.
You have to prospect. And a lot of people are just like, I just can't do that. Fine, you don't get to play. Go find another job.
Yeah. That's it.
Then, though, you have to think to yourself, what's going to make me a little bit differentiating? What's going to make me a little bit different, a little bit better that somebody else isn't doing? And a lot of people can, so it's almost like a supplement to your workout.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So for some people, it's, I'm going to create the best buyer consulting meeting of all time.
Yeah.
Right? Some of it's the way they do that. Some of it's, I'm going to be I'm going to be known as an industry educator, and I'm going to do, teach the best CE classes of all time.
Yeah.
Some of them, I'm going to be a whiz at social media. But whatever that juice is, if you want to be great, then like pick one or two things and then just be, can I cuss? Like be a badass at it.
Yeah. And what that looks like is I think from a kind of a business quote is that either you're growing or you're shrinking in your business. We don't have the luxury of, staying consistent and just, kind of riding that line out. You either are improving your numbers, you're either getting better every single day or you're getting worse. There is no in between. And I think Jimmy really exemplifies that in a lot of different ways. He's been in the industry for a very long time, but every time I talk with him, on a monthly basis or however, it's always, the conversation is always, this is what I'm trying to go after. And through that interview, I think him telling his story, that's really what kept him going and brought a lot of his success, was that every time he made that accomplishment, he just, there was, what else can I do more? What's the next step? How can I become better than I was yesterday? And I think that really sums it up. And that's the biggest lesson I learned from him. Second person I had on was Ashley Williams with Pest Pro. Ashley's a good friend of mine, and her one line is do a good job. What's something that's come easier to you with pest, like owning a business with pest control? Like is there anything that like when you started is like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this. And it just turned out easy.
The growth.
The growth.
Yeah. I said I had a 5-year plan. We've done it in 2.5, 3 years. It came easy, and I think it came from having that system in place.
What was the system to growth?
Do a good job. It was that simple. It was, it's so cliche, treat everybody how you want to be treated. But there were a lot of things that we knew when you heard the name Pest Pro that we wanted you to think of: being trustworthy, ethical. You knew we weren't going to cut any corner. We're not going to put a Band-Aid on something. And so, everyone asked, well, how did you grow? What did you do? We just did a good job.
And I think that is something that is so overlooked and undervalued in business and just with people today. And Ashley, by far, exemplifies doing a good job. And I'm not saying doing a good job just for the product or services they're offered, but she exemplifies that as like she really embraces that, and she does a good job from every aspect of her business and every time she's out there in the workplace. And through her interview, I think you could really see that. One of the comments she made was that even down to the dress code of her employees, it's intentional, right? And so when you're intentional about things and you're intentionally trying to do a good job in every aspect of your business, you're going to get the success. And when it comes to doing a good job, she also takes that personally. She wants to do a good job. She wants to be the leader. She wants to be the best manager. She wants to be the best boss. She wants to do a good job. And that's how she has built her culture of employees that all want to do a good job. And I think that's just, it's something that isn't talked about enough. And that is definitely a lesson that I've learned. And some of the things we talked about on that interview, I took and implemented into my business because I kind of took a step back and was thinking, I was like, geez, I didn't realize, where I'm so focused on trying to get new business or what have you, I'm not doing a good, I'm letting some people down in some areas. I need to just do a good job. And that's one of the notes that I have here is doing a good job by taking care of your people. And I think that, again, maybe taking care of the small stuff and the big stuff will work themselves out. If you do a good job on the very small things, the big picture always seems to paint itself. So, but that's it for Ashley. So the third person I had on was Don Duncan, and he's with Don Duncan's All-American Tire and Auto. I've known Don for a little bit, but when I had him on, he was probably the first person that I had on that I thought I knew well, and I didn't. And Don's one line is, have faith. How do you keep that faith?
Oh, well, I definitely have faith in God, and I've been blessed. My dad, I guess I got his attitude.
Yeah.
I'm not a worrier. Things happen for a reason.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. There may be something that doesn't have it positive, and I may not understand why, but it is what it is, so we can either whine about it or we can go forward and find something else.
And I like it. I like it a lot. And I know that may seem a little confusing, but one of the biggest lessons I learned from Don was outside looking in, I thought he was always successful. And meaning that every, location and store that he opened as far as a tire and automotive shop, I just thought he did great at it. I thought he, whatever he put his name on it did well. Well, when he got on the interview, he talked about how many times he had failed, how many times he had shut down businesses, how many times he had to open up new locations. And through that, even during the interview, I was really taken aback in the fact that he didn't seem to be wavered at all by even talking about that, which was pretty mind-blowing to me. Because for me, if I fail, if I do something wrong, I kind of hold on to that. Don doesn't. Don simply says, oh, well, I have faith that other things will come. And I think that the have faith really embodies Don in that. And that also creates a positive attitude, because the way he looks at it, and I think one of the quotes to quote Don, it was something along the lines of, just because it didn't work here doesn't mean it's not going to work somewhere else. Don says, just because, I failed at this one thing doesn't mean I need to change my trajectory entirely. All I have to do is just work a little harder, maybe do something a little different, but things will work out. And that's where the faith really comes in. And that's probably the biggest takeaway I learned from that interview, was that just having faith in what you're doing and having, that just because something happens doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Just because one thing doesn't fall in place like you thought it would doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. There could be new things coming along the way. Jeff Mallinson with Georgia Floors Direct, his one line is commitment. I think the interesting thing with Jeff is something that I did not know, and as I've known him for a little bit, done business with him. Of course, I'm in real estate, and he owns a flooring company, and I've flipped houses and things like that. So I've done some business with him. But what I did not know about Jeff was that he actually has been working for the same company forever, and was under, the same person, almost his entire career, and learned from one of the best people ever there. And he stayed committed through that. And I think that is something that is, especially in my generation and the generations after me, but people quickly jump around to the next best thing. They quickly, if it's not perfect and just the way they like it, they throw it away and they go on to something different. But there is so much value in staying committed to something. I think you can even expand on that outside of business and look at it with relationships, marriage, or whatever it may be. There's a lot of value in staying committed to something because you actually get the full benefits of it, right? You don't give up too soon on something that could turn out to be phenomenal.
Since I was 18 years old.
That's awesome.
So I'm 50, so that's about 32 years, 33 years.
So you probably know a thing or two about the flooring industry.
Yeah, and I know people like my former business partner Dick McAdams, who's been in it 67 years, who's forgotten more than I ever knew. So that's humbling.
Yeah, I imagine so. So when did you, Monroeville for a while, when did you make the leap to Montgomery?
I actually got a job with the fire department in Montgomery, and again, young man trying to find a career that provided for my family. And at the time, we had 2 children. And we moved to Montgomery, I think, in 1993. Yeah, so in 93, we moved to Montgomery. And taking the job at the fire department, you didn't get it right away. You had to live in Montgomery or near Montgomery. So my brother was working at GCO Carpet Outlet at the time, which I said, hey, I need a job. And he said, come on. And so I got a job as a warehouse guy working at GCO Carpet in Montgomery, where is over off of Atlanta Highway across from the Krispy Kreme Donuts now. It's a Beauty and Beyond now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So how long did you stay at GCO? And what does GCO stand for, by the way?
Georgia Carpet Outlet.
Did Georgia Floors Direct come from that, or is it totally different companies?
It did. It was a morphing. It was a evolution, if you will.
Okay.
What it was is Dick McAdams, like I said, who's my former business partner. He's been in the flooring industry since 1958. And he was in the full service flooring industry for years and years. And he opened up Georgia Carpet Outlet, which was an outlet. We did no installation. It was just, matter of fact, our slogan was everything $3 to $13 a square yard. And he opened up the one store here and then opened up a store in Birmingham. And from there, he grew that to 12 company stores and 101 franchise stores. So it was a very large company. And I worked for them from 93. And then when my job came available for the fire department, I went and took my job for the fire department. Got in my very first Montgomery fire and turned around and retired the next day and went and got my job back at the carpet store.
Started with flooring is like, this is where I'm going to be, right?
Yeah, it was a little too hot in the kitchen for me at the fire department, which I had great accolades to the fire department here in Montgomery. We have a wonderful fire department. They're an amazing group of people. Matter of fact, Chief Jordan, who is now the chief over the whole fire department, was Lieutenant Jordan at the time. And he was a... Ooh,
he was tough.
He was tough. He was tough, but great man, great man.
So the story is you left for the fire, but maybe,
Yep.
Got it.
Didn't want to get anybody hurt, so I came back, did a better job at flooring, and moved to sales. And from sales, I moved to assistant manager, and from assistant manager to co-owner with Dick McAdams in 2001.
In Jeff's story, he started out working in a warehouse, and now he owns the company. Which I just think is phenomenal, and that probably wouldn't have happened if he decided when he was in sales to go take the job that paid a little bit better at the other company. he decided that loyalty was important, that staying, on task and staying on, committed to someone and respecting someone who's been so good to him meant something, and I think that's why he's had success throughout all of these years, and he's flooring the Southeast, is because he stayed true to what he believed in. He stayed true, and he stayed true to his vision, which was he believed in what was going on. And I think since he did that, he now can share that same vision and belief with the people that are working for him. And I think there's some opportunities of people that stay with him and work for him that will continue to be there because of commitment. And I just think that so often now and today, and even personally in my life, like I don't give something long enough to work. I'm not committed, and I don't give things enough time to work. So that was the biggest lesson and takeaway that I had from that interview, was that commitment, there's value in commitment. We'll leave it at that. Next person I had on was my good friend Mike Peacock, and his one line is lead by example.
Continue to add people. When I got to Montgomery in 2006, I had about 35 people in the office. And when I left in 2019, I had 60. And we went from a $2 million operations to right at $6 million.
That's awesome.
Pretty good.
Yeah, no kidding. So did you take all of the things you learned from a management position into the pest control? And where did you get that knowledge? Was it just on the job experience training?
Actually, I was in a meeting. I just told this story earlier today. I was in a meeting in New Orleans when I worked at the quarry in Auburn, and the vice president of human resources, we clicked, and he came up to me about midweek and said, "Do you read?" And I'm like, "Well, I can read." He says, "No, that's not what I ask you. I ask you, do you read?" And I'm like, "Well, magazines, newspapers." He says, "Here," and he hands me a book, and it was Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He said, "Read that, call me when you're finished, and let's talk about it." And that's what I did. I fell in love with reading at my mid-20s, and I've never stopped. But what I learned through that is that there is a difference between being a manager and being a leader.
Yes.
So a good manager is not necessarily a good leader, but a good leader is always a good manager too.
What do you mean by that?
Well, management is about processes. That's it.
Yeah,
Simple.
systems
It's
and
about
checklists.
systems and checklists. Yeah. Leadership is about inspiring other people to live up to their potential, not your idea of them, but what they're capable of. So once you've identified that, then you have to equip them. You look at everything in life as either a cost or an investment. Well, people are an investment. And if I invest into you, I invest into Lyle, and I make Lyle a better man. Well, in return, Lyle's a better spouse, a better father, a better neighbor, a better community. And in return, you provide better service to our customers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what leaders do.
I first met Mike through a business networking group, and I don't know if you could tell on the interview, but Mike's a pretty big guy. Mike's 6'6"-ish, somewhere around there. Big stature, heck of a guy. But he kind of has this presence of a natural leader. And so to me, wanting to be the best leader and, person that I can be, I picked his brain, and he's ended up finding out he was actually a business coach. And so we've met several times. He's helped me through a lot of things. But one of the biggest takeaways from that interview and just knowing Mike is lead by example. And leading by example, I think, comes from accountability and responsibility that a person has. If you don't hold yourself accountable, you can't hold other people accountable. And I think the people you're trying to lead, if you're doing it that way, see right through that. You can't lead because they don't trust you, right? And so with him, that's really what I have learned to embrace, is that if I want a business that you can rely on and people can trust, I have to rely and trust on myself. And what that means is that if I tell myself I'm going to start working out and eating healthy, I better abide by that. I better have some accountability with that, and I think that leading by example is it's something that is talked about but not really understood. At least for me, that's my perception of it. A lot of people say lead by example, but there's very, very few people that actually do it, that actually embrace it and understand the true meaning behind leading by example. And so I just, that's one of the biggest takeaways I learned from Mike was that just you have to have that accountability and responsibility to really lead. And when you get to a point where you can lead, then you can start changing people's lives. Then you can start helping them find their why and start inspiring them and really helping fulfill their full potential, but not necessarily their full potential, but make their lives better. And that's the most fulfilling thing out there that I've experienced so far on this, on this earth, is that helping others is really great. And you can only do that if you lead by example. So next person I had on was Michael Morgan with First Community Bank. His one line is relationships are everything. And I think there is a ton of truth to that. Michael's one of those guys that just everybody knows him, and no one ever has anything bad to say about him, And I think that's because, for one, there's not anything bad to say about him, but also what I mean by that is he's always in the presence of the community and always doing positive things and encouraging and, just being a positive, influence and attribute to the community that he's in. And he realized very early on from his mentors that it's about the people. It's about other people. It's not about you. It's about everyone else. And by doing that, by giving back, by truly pouring yourself into that, you'll get some of that in return.
How you look at the people behind those numbers, especially in the case of a loan, that's where it gets different. That's where I started enjoying meeting the people, seeing the different walks of life that they came from, being involved in, if you may not think about it, but in the banking world, you see people when they buy a new home, when they have the birth of a child, when they start a business, when they have a wedding, and unfortunately sometimes when they have someone pass away. You see the highs and the lows in their life, and you get to be a part of their life.
I was about to say you're a big part of that. Because you're loaning the money to make things happen. So
we like to think that if you're doing it the right way, you do become a big part of that, and it becomes a relationship.
Yeah, for sure. So, and I think the biggest thing for me with that interview was I was just shocked on his mindset and why. One of those examples he gave during his interview was. When First Community designed the new bank location, I can't remember which one it was, but he wanted it was designed in the aspect of like when you walked in, you could see everyone's office and you could see directly to them. And what that did was allow some transparency and make sure that there was to me, the way I perceived that was like almost a level playing field, that if you wanted to go talk to the president or CEO of the bank, you just walk right over there and do it because you were just as important as they are. They valued the people. They valued that relationship. They wanted to make sure you knew that was important to them. And so I just think that's incredible. And I think that a lot of people don't put enough value in relationships. They don't put enough value in caring for people. And they don't see the value that you could get by just treating people well and making sure that they know you care, what that can do for you in your life. Next person is Angela Allen. Her one line is, be open to possibilities. That's cool. So how long did you do that role? And like, what year was this, by the way?
03.
03, so
Yeah.
03 is when you entered the home.
Yeah, I think I was like 22 or 23 when I started working there.
Yeah.
So I was in that role, and, the association, you may have a job there, but you wear many hats. I mean, you do a lot of different things, and I knew I could do more there, and it was just, I just kind of just dove in and started doing a lot more outside of the scope of work that I was really hired to do. And so after a few years, I was promoted to membership director. So I started kind of handling new members and trying to work on things like that, and then got into event planning and that sort of thing.
Have you always been kind of a go-getter and wanted to strive for more? Because it seemed like you had a plan very, very early on. Like, this is what you're going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. Head down. Have you always been like that?
I feel like I've always been that way. I've been a self-starter, problem solver.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now you're doing networking events and maybe recruiting to the Home Builders Association?
Yeah. So just kind of getting into that part of it. And then, let's see, about 8 years ago, it was 8 or 9 years ago, the executive officer position opened up.
And, you know, I just started, well, we didn't have an executive officer at that time, and they were looking for someone. So really, there was a lot more on my plate, and I started taking on a lot more. And then I started thinking, hey, I think I can do this. Yeah. They put me in there in an interim position. And just the more that I thought about it, I was like, you know, I think I can do this. I think I can handle this role.
What is that role? What is that?
Just managing the day-to-day activities in the association, following our budget, working, putting together a budget for the year, just everything that goes into the association.
Now, Angela Allen is with the Montgomery Home Builders Association, and she was the first person I've had on that I had never met before. So that was a big. It was a new thing for me, you know, because other people that I've had on, I've had a little bit of relationships with as far as I knew before they came onto the show, but I did not know Angela, and she was recommended to have on through a friend, and I'm thankful that she did come on. But I think for me, I was really shocked and awed by the story that she had in regards to she had her life planned out, and through that plan, all of a sudden it changed, and she just went with it. And that's why I say be open to possibilities, because she didn't just stop or, you know, try to do something, you know, pout or anything like that. She was open to the change and open to the possibilities and just stepped right into the door that opened. And I think for me, that was a big lesson, because so many times that I have certain ideas or I have certain plans or I have certain goals to accomplish, and when they don't work out that way, I feel like, gosh, like I try to force it or whatever it is. And she didn't, you know, through all of the stories in the interview that I had, she never was like that. Even one of the things we were talking about in there was the parade of homes and how it was such a good thing before, and now how sometimes it doesn't struggle. And she's like, well, this maybe not work anymore, and we have to do something different. Well, if I probably was in her position, I'd try to figure out how to make the parade of homes work instead of being open to the possibility of something being different and possibly even being better than the parade of homes. So I think that's really important. Another thing she talked about on there was that her husband became pretty ill, and through that time of her life, she stayed open, and she had faith, and she was open to the possibilities of things not being bad and not, you know, things being good. And I think that's super, super important. You know, to kind of let go of that control sometimes, you know, and be open to the idea of things not working out the way you thought they should work out, because they could actually work out much better. And so that's a big lesson I think we could all use. Judson Vaughn, his one line is believe in what you do. And Judson Vaughn, he's a good friend of mine, and Judson is in insurance. And let me tell you, he believes in what he does. And I think that is super, super important. And after that interview, I didn't realize how important that actually was, because I did spend some time and thought about that.
I really do believe that things are easier with me.
Yeah.
Now, granted, does that raise my stress level just a little bit? But you know, by profession, sometimes I feel like a defense attorney.
Yeah.
Because you know, I try to protect my clients. You know, I try to make sure that they have everything that they need, and most of the time more than they need. From the aspect of being able to reach me, because being reachable is so important.
Yes.
And not just being a figurehead or whatever you want to call it. I want to make sure that if people need Judson, that they get Judson.
Yep.
You know, you can delegate all sorts of stuff, and thankfully we have the structure in place that, you know, I don't have to do everything.
Yeah.
But I know how to do most everything.
Yeah. If you offer a product or service and you don't believe in it, what are you doing? Right? And I think that, you know, if you don't believe in what you're doing, what's the point of doing it? If you don't believe that your product or service could really help the other individual, you're not, you know, what are you doing? It just doesn't make any sense. And Judson truly believes, and I believe some of the products and services he offers are really great things, but he embodies that, and he believes it, and he embraces it. And I think we all need to do, you know, I say we all, I will leave it just with me on this one. I needed to do a better job reflecting and making sure that my foundation of what I offer and the products and services that I offer, I absolutely 100% believe in. And I think that's an important lesson for business owners and people that are in the sales industry and things like that, is that really know your product, really know what it is that it's offered, and make sure you believe in it. Make sure you'd buy that product, because if you don't, it's going to be, it just doesn't make sense for anybody involved, the person selling or the person buying. Next person I had on was James Sanders. He is with F&E Sportswear, and he's a big branding guy. And his one line is, look for the opportunity. Your role now.
I'm vice president of operations for F&E Sportswear. I took that role over about 3 years ago. The owner of our company, hands down, run our business. It just got to a point where he just got too busy.
Yeah.
And he needed some extra help. And so that I came in and I took that over with him.
So you've been in it 32 years?
32 years.
Yeah, 32 years.
Yep.
And so
same job, same company.
How has that been? How, looking back and where you're at now, how would you sum that up?
There's ups and there's downs in our business.
Yeah.
There's going to be good years and bad years. But it was a business that I could do every day, and I enjoyed it. I would not be there 32 years if I didn't enjoy it.
What do you enjoy the most about it?
It's different every day. I see different people every day. I see different products. I have different problems every day.
Got it.
So I'm not dealing with the same thing every day and it becoming monotonous on me.
Gotcha. So you don't like habit. You kind of like the change.
I do like the change.
Yeah, me and you share that, because most people out there do not like change. They want something predictable. They want, what have you. But the more change for me, almost the better. It creates excitement,
Right.
Yeah.
Selling for 27 years did get a little monotonous, and probably the best person to ask is my wife. But she'll tell you now, I'm happier than I ever have been.
Since you took over?
Since I took over. And it may be just the personality that I have, but I enjoy that role. I enjoy having those issues coming at you all day long. Door never stopping. It's constantly open. Somebody else coming through it with a different issue. And being able to doing the best I can to deal with that problem.
Okay.
So I like that stress.
Yeah. You fixing problems, it brings you joy.
It does.
Yeah, I share that as well.
I enjoy that.
James, I knew a little bit, but after the hour we spent talking on the podcast, I learned a lot about James, and I had a lot more respect and, or not respect, maybe that's not the right word. I admired him a lot more. That's probably a better word to use. And because he talked about his upbringing and some of the things he experienced, and one of the lines he used is that failure doesn't mean true failure. Failure is just another opportunity opening up. It's something to learn. Failure is something you can learn from. And I think that's really important for business owners, but just people in general. Because I think what it does is that, like, if you can truly learn from failure, you grow as a person. And now all of a sudden that failure doesn't turn into something bad. It's a positive. And, I started doing a little bit of reflecting after that interview on the drive back to the office. And I was thinking, like, gosh, I've looked at some failures before and I still have, negative thoughts about that. But gosh, if I look at it from a learning curve, like, I'm almost thankful, and that's a really important thing to be able to do. And I think James is excellent at it. I think through all the problems that, the problems that he had during his business with COVID and things like that, and also some of the experiences he had as a young adult and things like that, is if he chose to look at those through a negative lens, I feel like he'd be a much different person and be in a much different situation than he is today. But he chose to look at it and learn from it. Not necessarily a positive, but to try to learn and figure out how we could grow from that. And I think if we could all do a little bit more of that, we'd be in a lot better situations than we are now. And episode 10 was with David Finlayson. He is owner of Jack's Tavern in Epicure, formerly Fantail. And I say formerly Fantail because it did change. And his one line is embrace change. David, I really didn't know at all, but he's a really interesting guy, really, really smart guy, really cares about what he does. And the one thing I learned through his story is that he knew what to do to be successful, but he knew his gut told him he needed to change, but he let some outside sources continue to let things go the way they were until, he had to force the change, and then he embraced change and he saw huge success through it. A little bit of backstory on that was he owned a restaurant forever and it was doing business a certain way, and then, you know, it wasn't doing as well as it could have, and trying to figure out how to make that model work. And he ended up changing it and offering something entirely different. And he really had some success with that. What was the plan to go back, build bigger and better, or was it to replace, or what was the thought process there? Because you're new into management.
Sure.
You just, a tragedy just happened. You're just back in the restaurant business. What was your mindset and the plan going into that?
Well, I was new into all of this, so I was just kind of following my father and Rita, my stepmother's lead. You know, they started laying out the plans. We literally, based on the plans, made mock-ups where you see them like on war tables. We're setting up the kitchen. Virtually for the and trying to see what the steps were to do this and to do that. And I was just kind of following at first, and then they started asking me questions, and I put my 10 cents in, and it baffles my mind that they listened to anything I said. At the time, I'm wet behind the ears, don't know anything of what's going on. But we decided at the time, we had a little cash flow. We'd been blessed for many years, so now's the time that you fix any problems that you had. And that's when, all the bold and the high ceilings and everything on the walls, if we had little amounts of that before, now we're going to do it to it.
But I think a lot of people have experiences through business and just life of doing things a certain way, and it works for them. And it has worked for them, and it works for a very, very long time. And now one day you wake up and maybe it just doesn't work as good. And sometimes it's hard to really reflect and make those changes and embrace that change and do something entirely different. But if you do, the opportunity of success that comes behind that is just it's you don't know what you don't know, right? And I'm kind of stumbling over my words here, but I kind of wanted to expand on that a little bit besides embracing change, because it's a lot deeper lesson I learned from that besides just be open to the possibility of change. I think maybe what I'm trying to say is that David was surrounded by people to tell him to do things exactly the way they were because they've been done that way for a very, very long time, and it's been successful. And he didn't believe that. And so his gut told him to do something different, and he did, and he saw massive success because of that. So maybe having that faith and embracing your gut feeling and embracing the change to come, I think if we do that instead of fighting it, we all would end up a lot better off. So, well, that's what I've got. I hope you enjoyed my 10 lessons learned from my first 10 episodes, and I will catch you next time.